Are you searching for a podcast that discusses the most important issues of our day, all from a Christian perspective? Then add Rise Radio to your podcast playlist. Rise Radio explores topics that are shaping our world: philosophies, social narratives, belief systems, prophecies, strange phenomena, as well as spirituality. No topic is off limits. Rise Radio is about sharing the good news of Jesus Christ across the planet. Listen now on Spotify, Amazon Music, Apple Podcast, Buzzsprout, and wherever you get your podcast. Rise above the noise. Discover the truth. Tune into Rise Radio on your favorite podcast player right now.
Welcome everyone to today's episode of the Rise Radio podcast. Please do give us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify if you can, and share this with anyone you think who would benefit from listening to the show. So, for a long time now, it's been a subject of discussion whether one can find Noah's Ark, the remnants and evidence of it, and it certainly has been for the group Noah's Ark Scans, who have recently hit the news again on their quest to uncover whether or not this formation in eastern Turkey that does indeed look like a boat, whether or not they can scientifically prove that this is indeed the remains of the Biblical Ark. So in the last couple of weeks, a veteran US defense scientist has deployed advanced Earth radar technology at Turkey's boat-shaped Noah's Ark formation. His name is Dr. Khosrow Bakhtar. He's a veteran of more than 25 years at the US Department of Defense projects and author of over 200 technical papers. So he went to the site that is being managed by Noah's Ark Scans, and he used his advanced technology to see if this is just a natural rock formation or something much more intriguing. Now, it's my absolute pleasure to invite one of the leading researchers on the Noah's Ark Scans team to our episode today. So hi Andrew Jones, welcome to Rise Radio Podcast today. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Happy to share what we're doing out here in Turkey.
Before we go on to the new scans, which all sound pretty exciting, could you just give us a brief overview about what you're doing there near Mt Ararat?
Yes, so the site we're researching is a controversial site, but there are people who believe, including ourselves, that this is the real location for Noah's Ark. And it's a boat-shaped formation that was first discovered over 60 years ago, in 1959. A Turkish army cartographer found it. And he announced that basically they made it worldwide news back in 1959 and 1960. Then an American expedition went out there, and they went out to the site with the Turkish army and checked it out, and they measured it, and it was exactly 300 cubits long, which is the size given in the book of Genesis for Noah's Ark. But it was just an earthen formation. There was nothing on top, the surface, but rocks and dirt. And so they left kind of disappointed. But the story picks up over 15 years later. In 1977, an American explorer named Ron Wyatt, who saw the original article about this in 1960, he comes out there with his two sons, and that starts over a decade of investigation by him until 1987, when the Turkish government built a visitor center and made it a national park. And then 10 years after that, I show up. I was in college, and I heard about the site through Ron Wyatt, and I decided that I would go see it. He had come out to California and did some lectures when I was in middle school in the early 90s. And my father went to the lectures, and he came back and said, this man believes they have found Noah's Ark. So I got interested, and I bought Ron Wyatt's book. And then I decided to call him. And this was before the internet, so I dialed the operator in America, and they gave me Ron's home number, and they connected me, and he actually picked up the phone. And I was very surprised that he would pick up. But then that started about almost a 10-year conversation with him through the 90s. And we had him out to California twice to give lectures about the Noah's Ark work he was doing. And that was in 95 and 96. And then 1997, in middle of college, I went out there and I saw the site for the first time. Then in 2000, I came out with a group of people, and we met with Dr. Salih Bayraktutan, who has been studying this site since 1984 or 1985. He's retired now, but he was a Turkish professor of geology. And we reconnected with him in 2022, and he was very gracious and wanted to share his knowledge about his research over all these years. He's still alive, and he still believes it's the best candidate for Noah's Ark. So since 2020, when the pandemic started, I've been living out here in Turkey for half the year, and we've been promoting and helping to renovate the visitor center, connecting with Turkish scientists, and promoting this online and in the media about the research we're doing on the site.
The site itself, it does actually look boat-shaped, doesn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, it's a very interesting formation.
Yeah, and that itself can be controversial. Some people believe that, in the book of Genesis, it gives three dimensions for the ark. It gives the height, width, and length. And so some people assume that, well, that means the boat has to be box shaped, like a rectangular box. We know the Bible says it has three decks, one door. We know the dimensions of the boat, and it has a roof and a window around it. But we don't know like where was the toilets or how many rooms were inside for the animals, or even how many animals were on the ark. So there are details about it that we don't know about. And today, if you look at ships and vessels and you describe if you own a yacht or something and you talk about the width, usually it's the widest part that you're saying. And the length, of course, is how long it is. But if it has a pointed end, you're not going to give like every single width dimension. And so just like the Durupinar site has a pointed front end, you can say that's the bow, and a rounded back end. It's a ship shape, so the widest part is actually 138 feet wide, so it's a little larger than what the Bible says for the 50 cubits in the Bible. But at the same time, those 50 cubits could be the average for the width of the boat, but it is exactly 300 cubits long. And as you said, it is ship shape. That's what got Captain Drupinar's attention. They had these high altitude photographs. And in 1959, it was actually 9/11, September 11, 1959, when he saw these as they were mapping out eastern Turkey. He saw this ship shape on the side of the mountain, and that got him really excited.
We're going to preface this because we're going to talk about the most recent scans, but it's important to say this before we go there, because the scans you say are actually providing more information that helps people to see that this may not just be a natural geological formation. What do you think these scans prove that you've recently done? Because they're quite specialist scans, aren't they?
Yeah, so just so the audience knows, so the site has not been excavated yet. So the Turks have allowed non-destructive technology to look below the surface, to understand the soil there. So before what we did this year, in 2019, we did ground penetrating radar. We had the Science Channel, which is owned by Discovery. We had a British team out there that the Science Channel had hired from London, and they filmed our work doing the GPR. Now, radar using electromagnetic signals penetrating the soil thousands of times a second, these waves of signals, the central processing unit, they can collect the data, and then later they can go back to the office, the geophysicists and the geologists, they can use the software to make 3D models, try to find anomalies and other things that would stand out from the surrounding terrain. And what they noticed from the 2019 scans was that there was a central series of cavities or voids going down at the same level, going down below the ground about 4 meters down and about 2 meters high in some places, the center line of the boat shape, starting at the pointed end. And on the inside western, where you see the hull of the rim of the ship above ground, that ship shape that you see in the photographs, on the inside of that, they found another, at the same depth, 4 meters down, broken series of these voids. And the geophysicist was surprised. She said, for sure, this has to be they're high reflective, the radio waves, whatever you want to call it, they're not going through this area. And when they map it out in 3D, they're showing to be like air pockets, voids or cavities, and they form a pattern. They're going down the inside of the hull or the center line of the boat, and the center one actually heads to a huge cavity that's in the middle of the ship. When you look at photographs of the site, you'll see there's a couple big boulders in the middle that have rolled into the object, but right below that, into the downhill of that, is a central cavity that goes down 13 meters, about 40 feet below the surface. And these tunnels, especially the center one, leads right to that. So people ask, well, what Noah's Ark can have tunnels? Yeah, well, it's a buried, decayed ship now, but maybe there's possibilities that some of the cavities, Noah's Ark had compartments, the Bible says in Genesis chapter 6. So maybe these compartments have not all got filled in with mud. Maybe there was some preservation, petrification, or mineralization of the wood that, is a wooden boat that held these cavities still open. And so when the mud came in, they could have filled up everything but some of these rooms that we're seeing. And the other possibility is that the rooms are now filled in with silt or sand, but it's a different material than the surrounding soil. And so the radar is picking that up so that you have the shape preserved, but the rooms themselves are filled with sand. So the critics, they claim that this is just random above ground. You see the ship shape because it's a random shape, that mud coming down a mountainside, it hits a boulder or bedrock and it flows around the hard, material, and it creates the ship shape. So they say the whole thing is natural. That's one of the criticism, is that this is bedrock right here. What the new radar is showing, and this is a radar that the U.S. government has used to look for illegal tunnels on the Mexican border with the United States. It's been used in geological research for mines and also in archaeological research too. But this new radar can peer very deep into the surface. The material it's going through doesn't obstruct it. So you can go through clay or water or air pockets. And we just finished this. So we were still waiting for the initial results, which we'll have another week or two to wait on that. But we just finished last week. And the initial results are showing that there is no bedrock below the ship shape. So the ship shape is sitting on the mountainside. It's not like there's a big rock below it on the surface area that's causing the shape. And the radar shows that. When we get this all published, we'll be able to show the details. But the initial view, when we're looking at the data, is showing zero bedrock at that site or surface. And it's also the other thing that some critics were claiming. There's different theories. We say it's Noah's Ark, and others they have like 3 or 4 other theories as to why you have a ship shape there. So the other theory is that it's a solid rock that came down from higher up, and it got stuck at this place on the mountain, just happens to be the size of Noah's Ark. And then the ship shape came because glaciers went around it over thousands of years, they claim, or I don't know, or millions of years, whatever. And it created the streamlined shape. That was published in a peer-reviewed journal by a Turkish geologist. The only problem is, number one, the radar that we did in 2019, the ERT done in 2014, which uses electricity to map the features below the surface. So another non-destructive way. And then the new radar we did this year, the 2026 radar, and none of them show a solid feature below the ground. I mean, like just a solid block of rock. When you're walking on the site, it's all dirt. So you have to come up with another reason why this Earth information is exactly the size of Noah's Ark and ship shape. And we believe it's because of the features of a decayed wooden boat. As it slowly decayed over time, it got covered up, preserved like an imprint almost on the top of the soil. So the initial radar, again, we're waiting for the final results on the analysis, but it is disproving this idea that the site is rock, whether it's basement rock or bedrock or a rock that rolled down from above and over time became a ship-like. So yeah, that was very important. So we're very pleased with our initial analysis, and we're just waiting for the scientists to finish up their final report.
Okay, yeah, and I will link the scan image in the notes of the podcast. But these tunnels, so you believe if this was to be Noah's Ark, you believe they would be corridors in the boat. And as far as you're concerned, remnants of timber underground.
Yeah, exactly. We have to get down to the material to see what they are. But the radar, especially from 2019, which was more focused on the surface. The new radar we did, we were trying to see what's below, really deep on the side of the mountain. Just to answer the question, is this rock that's just sticking up from bedrock or something like that? So this year we went really deep. But the old, to say this, the old radar, the 2019 radar, that was near surface high frequency radar. So we're looking at 250 megahertz. We also went lower to 100 to go deep as 13 meters. That's where our data ends. So we're not really penetrating deep into the mountainside, but 13 meters is pretty good to get data there. But those features like the tunnels, they're only 4 meters down, where we're seeing these pockets of voids forming that line. And so, 4 meters down and then 1.5 to 2 meters high and then going in a straight line. So those are the things that are, still below the surface, but not deep in the mountainside. And so it's very possible that still is within the area when the ark was decaying, as a wooden boat decays, and then suddenly, whether it's a mud flow or something like earth flow, where the surrounding terrain just covered it up and then left it where it's at. So there's a possibility that the radar is showing still preserved rooms, but it's more than that, because in 2019, when we did the initial scans, we had another American archaeologist review the data, the first scientist to look at it, and he had found a series of right angles of high density material forming right angles downhill western inside of the boat. So that'll be the northwest area. And those series of right angles were 7 meters down. So a little lower than the tunnels we're seeing, but still within, you could say, not very deep in the mountainside. But he looked at that. He said if he was to do a excavation, he would do it right there to see what those are. Because usually in nature, he said, you wouldn't find this type of pattern. And that's what you're looking for with the radar, to see if there's something down below the ground that's forming a pattern of reflections that could help explain the ship shape. And we believe that this is more than just natural random rubble on the side of the mountainside. It's not just dirt and rocks, but it's the decayed buried remains of Noah's Ark.
And this is quite high up, isn't it? It's near to Mount Ararat in Turkey.
Yeah, we're 19 miles south, so we're across the valley, but we're on the Tinderik mountain range, which is another volcano. But in this area, it's sedimentary rock, so you have these flood deposit layers. You have fossils and fossilized coral there, and seashell fossils. But we're in feet, we're about 6,500 feet elevation at the site itself. So they're lower mountains, but across from the Mount Ararat, the big volcano.
So how do you feel about the results coming next week? Are you feeling apprehensive at the moment?
Uh, no. Well, it's kind of like a new technology in the sense that it hasn't been used in Turkey, and especially our site. So the new radar, I'm not. I'm more just can't wait to get the results.
Yeah.
Impatient. I guess that's the word I'm looking for. Impatient, because you put a lot of time and effort, and you just want to see what's there. What does
Yeah.
it show? So
Wow, that's really good. And from what I've read on your press release, the type of scan that was done recently is very high end, isn't it? It's the technology that he brought to the table is really something new for your project, so should be very interesting.
yeah, exactly. And we've asked him to not only just give us the data for the deep results, which is what his antenna or radar is designed for, but also if he could focus in and kind of quote zoom in, but focus on the top part of the near surface, like the top 30 meters, to see if it matches anything we've seen in the ERT scans from 2014 or the radar we did, the GPR done in 2019, to see if he's seen the same pattern of voids. Of course, our next step, I don't know if we're going to talk about that right now, but we are going to core drill. So that will help us to understand what's below the surface, because we'll be finally able to get material that we can test in labs as to exactly what are these shapes, like the right angles or some of the layers that others have seen in the ERT data from 2014. Let's see if they're related to man-made activity or just a natural phenomena.
So is that the first time you'll have looked at soil samples and sent them off for testing, or have you done that at all so far?
That will be the first time the site has ever been core drilled at depths like that. On our permit with the Turkish government, we're allowed to go down 75 meters. So that's pretty deep. Not every core we do will go down 75 meters, but there'll be locations where we'll try to go the max we're allowed to, and that will help explain what the geology is below the site. So we tested the soil, and what it's showing is that the soil inside the ship shape at these random locations we picked, the 88 samples at 22 locations, they're showing that the soil has 3 times more organic matter.
Interesting.
On the pH scale, it is a difference of a factor of 1. So the pH is different inside. And finally, the potassium is 38% more inside that ship shape versus outside. So taken all together, the theory that this is a decayed wooden ship, or whatever it is in the shape of a ship, that's exactly 300 cubits long. Well, if as a ship decays, it's made of wood, and if it has, the Bible talks about pitch that kept it waterproof. If you look at how that would decay over 1,000 years, you would get similar results like this, where you have a higher organic matter and the change in potassium. What you're looking at are random soil sites taken inside and random soil sites taken outside that were sampled and then sent off to an independent lab. It was at Ataturk University, about 4 hours west of the site, and they don't know like what samples from where, and they just gave us the results, and you run the math on it and you realize, oh, for like organic matter, for potassium, for pH, you're getting significant levels of difference between inside and outside. And the confidence
Interesting.
level for especially like the organic matter was 99.99% sure that this is significantly different because of how much difference you're seeing in the individual results. So yeah, the stats, math doesn't lie. So the stats are showing that for those type of things, and the other thing we tested for, I think we had a salinity, calcium carbonate or lime or something, but those were equal. So those never showed any difference between inside and out. The other one had to do with fertilizer. We just wanted to see if farming had anything to do with it, and that was phosphorus. And we talked to locals. So what would this be? 1948 or 49, there was an earthquake there. And before that earthquake, one of the oldest locals in the village, he mentioned that they used to, cut the grass in that valley where the Ark site is today. And it wasn't farming, like they didn't fertilize the soil. He said it was just natural grass that was growing. They'd cut it, dry it, and that would form the animal feed, that make hay, and they'd give it to the animals in the wintertime. But he said he never used fertilizer out there. But then in 48, when the earthquake hit, the ship shape appeared, and all the surrounding terrain outside of the ship was all broken up with crevices and cliffs and just really rough terrain. And so they definitely didn't do any more of the making hay out there and growing that grass. So and that ship was left alone. He was right in the middle of this rough terrain until 10 years later. Then Captain Durupinar sees it with the high altitude photographs from the early 40s or late 40s until now. When this guy is still alive, no one has put fertilizer out there and farmed it, so the soil is showing this difference. Now, we this last week brought in the same soil scientist and some others to help, and we took a lot more extensive samples at greater depths. So there's some criticism saying, oh, you should have sampled the hillside nearby and outside of the mud flow. And so we did that. So we're going to find out what that, we're doing our job at it. So doing our best. But we took a lot more samples, and maybe by, we're looking at April or May, we'll have some results to put out there in the press.
Yeah, because I was going to ask, have you found any local legends and stories about that place? But as you say, it only really appeared like this in the 1940s.
Yeah, before you can say basically because of the invention of aircraft, because of the high altitude photographs that it got the world's attention. And before that, just the locals knew about it. They didn't expect to see a ship right there. Now, the names are interesting in that area. For example, this ship shape is on Mushar Mountain, the village nearby. The old name is Mushar, and that basically means doomsday. Another thing, Google even says, Google Translate says Armageddon or Last Judgment. So it's very interesting that the Bible, the flood story, is a judgment on the world, and then as a Christian believer, we believe what Christ says, that in the end, people will have the same type of attitude, and the earth will be basically the same. He says, as the days of Noah, so it shall be at the coming of the Son of Man. And so you have the same idea that the world will be in the same conditions as it was before the flood of Noah. And here we have this mountainside, just happens to be called Judgment Day Mountain. The other interesting thing is right above it, there's this cliff, and the village near there It's called, and I'll just say in English, I'll butcher the Turkish word, but it means where the crow or blackbird won't land. And so when I talk to the locals about that, they say, "Well, we shoot these birds because we don't want them in our area." But the name itself it has the same idea of the biblical story where Noah sends out the raven, which is basically a form of a crow or blackbird, and it can't find land, so it comes back to Noah's Ark. And so right above where the ship is at today, you have the same connotation of where the blackbird or crow won't land. So we are in the biblical location for Noah's Ark. These are the mountains of Ararat, and the ancient word for that area was Urartu. That was an ancient kingdom, and that's where we get the English word Ararat. And so we're not in like China or Africa or South America. We are in the right area, location, and we're at 6,500 feet elevation above sea level. And there's no ancient body of water from the time of the flood in this area. There's not like a lake nearby or something, but yet we're finding a boat right there on the side of the mountain. And there are fossils around it, it's a seashell, shallow water fossils, and fossilized coral reefs. So it's a very fascinating site. And for us, it's one of the best candidates. People might disagree, but unless someone shows me another Noah's Ark site that we can go research and compare, this is the one where we think is the best one.
When it comes to all of this, your projects, you have a visitor center out there, you said, and people can go out to Turkey and go on tours, which I recommend if anyone does want to go there. Put your link to your website in the show notes. But how does the Turkish government react to you doing this project out there?
No, they're fine. The locals are very, from the government level, even all the way up to Ankara. We met with the national park, which runs that site. They're very supportive of the research and the having tourism out there. Of course, it helps the economy. So we have not had any negative feedback from people we talk to. Now, I don't know if it's competitors, those looking for Noah's Ark someplace else, or jealousy. But initially when we started this project and had the permits, we started 1st of July. But within a week, we had to have a pause for about 3 or 4 days because some people decided that they wanted to complain to the government about the project. And they're claiming that, oh, Americans are doing something illegal by the Iranian border and, just making up stuff. And so that created a pause in our work, but it only lasted 3 or 4 days, I think it was. But we continued. But the governor's office wanted to check everything out to make sure everything was good. We had a permit though, so we're doing exactly what's in our permit. We're not doing anything illegal out there. And we have now security cameras installed too. And one of the cameras actually looks down on the Ark as a 45 optical zoom lens. And so they can monitor and see what's going on around the visitor center and the Ark site and make sure that nothing illegal is happening.
And what can someone expect if they were to come to your tour? Do you take them around the
Yes.
site and show them the different areas where you
Yes.
scanned?
Yeah, exactly. We have on-site explanation. Sometimes it's hard to do it over radio or even YouTube videos, but when you're on site, we can explain, hey, this is where Ron Wyatt did this, or David Fazal did that. This is where we've done these scans. This is the data from the soil. In the visitor center, there's a 5-minute video we show people. There are posters. There are fossils there. And then I know Nuri, the villager who runs the center for us, he has even little souvenirs like fridge magnets that people can buy and take home. But when you go outside, the visitor center is on the western hill. So when you go outside, you have an awesome view looking down in the valley where you can see the boat shape right there. And we do take people down onto it and around it and even high up above it towards the actual Iranian border, talk about where the Ark could have originally landed before it came down to its current location. It's just a very beautiful area. When you think of biblical lands and rustic landscapes, this is it. You have a local Kurdish village with sheep and shepherds around there, and you see Mount Ararat, the majestic volcano. It's a very beautiful area.
Where are you in relation to the 7 churches of the Book of Revelation in Turkey? Are you close
So
to
we're far the other side of the country. So those on the coast, the west coast, the Mediterranean area. We're near the Iranian border in Armenia. So we're on the south side of Mount Ararat. So that's the very far eastern little pointy area that sticks out of Turkey. When you look at the map, they have this little area that kind of goes further east, and in that area is Mount Ararat, Dohu Bayzet, the city that we stay in. 30 minutes outside of town is the Noah's Ark site.
It's quite a big move you've made, really, isn't it? And very hot place to live.
Well, actually, yeah, it was a big move, but the area, they have, like 4 seasons. You get snow in the winter and nice springs with green grass. Just like California, it turns brown in the summertime. So yeah, it depends. You get afternoon showers, and I really enjoy it. So I had no problem. But of course, before I moved out here, I was going back and forth many times since 1997.
And so I think as we bring this to a close, I want to know what would this mean to you if you were able to prove without doubt, because you're doing a lot in the scientific research to test the critics' ideas of the place. What would it mean to you personally if you were able to prove this against the critics?
Well, it's more than science. The only people looking for Noah's Ark are believers. Christians, those who there are Muslims too. We get emails from Muslims that saying, "Oh, Noah's Ark is over here, or over there," and other Christians too email us saying, "No, it's up here." And they sent me blurry images of an object they say is on Mount Ararat. So it's not just science. Now, in regards to faith, I believe the stories are true. I don't have to go find it. But for those who are needing science to confirm their faith, or they need to see more evidence to believe in these type of stories that's written in the Bible, then they need scientific proof. Just like doubting Thomas, he needed to see the physical nail prints in Christ's hands, and God was willing to show him that. But other people don't need that.
And what do you think the impact would be, or could be, to the wider general population if you were able to prove this? Do you think it would cause a big wave, so to speak,
There,
in the public?
yeah, very possible. What's really interesting is last few years, it's almost like every month we've had stories about Noah's Ark or about the research, something related to the flood story or something. So you see this uptick in interest that I don't know how it started, but in the last couple of years that has happened. So, and it's just continuing with this. We've gotten so many different requests for interviews, or people making YouTube or social media videos about the research, not even our own videos, but their own. And so I do think, once you get to having more data about the site, because the uptick right now, it's just about like the soil analysis or the GPR tests, surveys. But once you get to more data from inside the ship shape, then I think it'll create a very strong interest. Now, of course, the locals are hoping that will help with tourism and people coming out to see it. And it's very possible it will. Because of regional conflicts and the economy, the tourism industry is very finicky, so it goes up and down. So if there's rumors of a war somewhere in the Middle East, you'll get less tourists. But still, if you look at the overall trend, definitely the more people are coming out here, we're meeting them. We go to the site, and it's not just our tour groups, but there are other companies bringing tourists out there who are interested in it, or they just happen to be on a trip where they stop there. They don't know what's it about. So we're able to educate them about what we're doing there, and they're amazed. So there's definitely that interest.
Because I noticed that every time you have some news about what you're doing, it gets published in the Daily Mail, and various other outlets keep covering each step of the story, don't they?
Yeah, they do. They're very good about doing that, and I think they follow our social media. So whenever we put out something on social media, the last report in the Daily Mail about this, we didn't contact them about it. They just saw it from our social media post. So yeah, our social media, we're getting millions of views and a lot of interaction with the people, pro and con, but it's great. We don't care. We get atheists leaving comments, and of course supporters, and so it's all part of the same thing. So we're happy to answer anyone's questions.
So where would the listeners go and find your website and social media so they can keep up with what you're doing and see some of the examples we've been talking about today?
Well, so if they're on social media, they could check out our Facebook page. Just look up Noah's Ark Scans on Facebook. We're also very active on X, Twitter. So we're the same name, Noah's Ark Scans. And then our YouTube channel is different. It's Discovered Media. And so all three of those are the best. But if you can't remember any of that, just go to our website, which links to all the social media. And our website is noahsarkscans.com. That's ARK, noahsarkscans.com.
Andrew Jones, it's been a fascinating conversation, and I wish you all the best with the new developments, and we'll keep an eye out for what those results are coming soon.
Awesome to share, and we'll keep you updated. Yeah, we'd like to do it again later in the year and share what the latest results are.
Yeah, I'd love to have you back. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Okay, God bless.